So let's go about enhancing our original system. To do this, we will see how to incorporate multiple time frames. So let's say you're a trend trader looking to only take signals in the direction of the main trend. In the last video, we made use of the ADX indicator to capture the strength of the current trend on the current time frame. That's this 5-minute chart. To expand on this idea, we can also use a larger time frame chart to examine the overall direction of the market and further assess the strength of the trend. Okay, so we're back on the same 5-minute chart that we started on in the previous video. We still have Bloodhound running on that chart, and you'll notice I don't have Bloodhound running on the higher time frame chart. That's because the goal here is to have everything that we're working on consolidated onto one chart. So we're going to be pulling in data from the 15-minute chart and using that to filter out any signals that don't match the trend direction. So you can see I have the EMA 14 period on the higher time frame chart here. Throughout this whole region, this whole time frame, and by the way, I'm using the global cursor on both charts. That's why I'm able to see the crosshairs on both charts. And you'll notice that throughout this whole time period that we're looking at here, the EMA on the higher time frame is sloping down. And so what we expect to do here is to filter out any signals that we've already created that don't match that direction, leaving only the short signal because it matches the down direction of the EMA on the higher time frame. So let's get started, and that will become more clear as we go. So we'll open Bloodhound back up on the main time frame we're working on here. So far, if you remember, we have these two solvers, the crossover and the threshold. And they also show up on this left panel, the solvers panel as well. You may at some point end up in the snippet library. That's something we will talk about in a future video. It's also discussed in the documentation. But to get to where we're talking about today, let's go to the solvers tab. It's typically in the bottom unless you've done something custom there. And you'll see that the two solvers we've already created are under the default time frame. The default time frame is basically just the chart that this Bloodhound is running on, right? So Bloodhound, the indicator, which is what we're working in, is on the 5-minute CL chart. And so the default time frame is just whatever we're running on. And so if you were to take this file and put it, use it on a different chart, that's what the default time frame would be. But to add the 15-minute version or any other time frame to our system, we can go up to the Add Chart button up here, click that, and it creates by default a 1-minute chart down below with no solvers inside of it or underneath it, that is. Okay. We'll change this to a value of 15. Now that it's easy in this case because both charts are the CL 1122. We're just modifying the time frame, but you do have control over what that's based on. If you want to use daily charts, minute, second, range, tick, any of those. But for now, we will stick with the 15-minute value. Again, this is something that's important to remember because Bloodhound doesn't know what charts are on your screen. And so if you were to change the chart that you're using, let's say I decided this should be a 30-minute, for example, then I would need to change this to a 30-minute to reflect my system. So just keep that in mind. Any change you make on your charts generally need to be reflected in Bloodhound as well. Okay. So now we have added the 15-minute chart, and so now we just need to add a solver to that chart to pull data in from that 15-minute chart and use that. Now let's take a quick step back and remember what we're trying to do. We are trying to detect the slope of this EMA line because that is the way that, at least in this example, we are looking at the broader trend. Now to detect a slope, we have, again, another solver exactly with that name. So we'll go into the solvers button up here. Now you'll notice, now that we have two time frames on here, there are two options under the solvers. So we are looking to add a solver for the 15-minute chart. So we'll go solvers, 15-minute, and slope. Okay, and you'll see that it got put there. Now in case you choose the wrong one or want to change it, you can just click and drag it between them, and that you just drag it onto the time frame, and that lets you change the data source, basically, the chart that it's using. Okay. Okay, so that created a solver on our board. Let's drag it away. And you'll see that it very clearly says 15-minute. That tells us that this solver is looking at another time frame. That's a really quick way to visualize which solvers are looking at which time frame. So very helpful there. Now let's just connect it all by itself. Remember, one thing at a time is always good to keep focused and not get distracted by your other signals. Now, one thing we need to do before we proceed, if we go back to our chart, it says, new chart added, press the F5 key to update Bloodhound. That's because NinjaTrader wasn't expecting us to be asking for data from another chart, and so we need to reload the data for this chart to tell NinjaTrader, hey, I am now needing the 15-minute data, please give it to me so we can work with it. So we will reload NinjaScript or press F5. And we are getting signals already, but we're not even gonna check them right now because they are based on the SMA14, the default indicator for most things. So we'll go back into our slope solver and change that. So we're saying, okay, on the 15-minute chart, we are looking at the, see that, EMA 14 period. So we'll type in EMA, make it easy, double click that so it shows up down here, and make sure that the period and any other parameters or settings match the indicator that's on the chart that we're looking for. Again, it only has one plot, so we're good there. We can just click OK. All right, so let's take a look at our chart and see what we get. We can close the Bloodhound window to clear it out. By the way, when you close the Bloodhound window, it does save your file as long as you are working in a saved file. When I close that, that saves our work to the drive. Okay, so let's take a look and see if these signals match what we're seeing on the other chart. Okay, so let's find a nice range here. So as we see a lot of long signals that suddenly stop, turn short, and then go long, and then short again. So this is why we use the global crosshairs on both charts, because that lets us hover over and see, okay, under this bar, and in this range, you'll notice on the left chart it's green, and on the right chart the EMA is sloping up. So that makes sense. And if we scroll back, that whole range right there on the right is all sloping up. So that's why we're getting long signals. And then as soon as it starts sloping down, it's hard to tell visually because it's so subtle, but it did slope down for a 15-minute period. On the right chart, that's one bar it sloped down, and so we get 3 5-minute bars that get a short signal, because during those 15 minutes it was sloping down on the EMA, and then it slopes up by 2 bars. That's 2 15-minute bars, so 6 5-minute bars. So we are sloping up, so we get a long signal. And then from here forward for a very long time, it starts to slope down, 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 down. And if we move our cursor over to the right chart, we can actually, since we're on global crosshairs, it will actually drag the left chart over as we move. So it's very easy to confirm this whole range is all sloping down. So we get all short signals on the lower time frame. And if we scroll over a little bit more, wait until the EMA starts sloping up, and there it is. Yeah, as soon as it started sloping up. Now it's worth noting that this is based on the close value of the bars. So wherever the EMA was sloping at by the time the bar closed, that is what Bloodhound has access to in NinjaTrader. We only know the close value of those indicators. Okay. So as soon as it starts sloping up, we start getting long signals again. Perfect. Okay, so now that we've confirmed that we've configured our multi-time frame rules correctly for this slope solver, all we have to do is what we've already learned. Let's go back into the Bloodhound window and simply connect it. So let's disconnect this and visualize our old signals first. So let's just connect our old signals here. Move Bloodhound over. Remember, our goal is to filter out this long signal because it occurred during, oh, let me get back there. It occurred during a downtrend according to the EMA on the 15-minute chart. Okay, so that's what I expect when I connect the slope solver. So let's get this sort of in place, kind of organize things here. And when I connect that, let's see if it does. Yes. Okay, cool. And that left the short signal because it occurred during a downtrend. Our three conditions, remember, the crossover is producing a short signal, and the threshold solver is producing a short signal because it's producing both short and long. Remember that on the ADX, it's just above 25, so it doesn't care the direction. So we're getting short from the cross, short from the threshold, and the slope is also a short. That's why we kept that short signal. So let's scroll around and see if we can find some other examples or other signals that match. Because it's always a good idea, even if you're confident that you have configured it correctly, it's always good to confirm with as many examples as possible. Because if you're not paying attention, you can fool yourself on what you're seeing. There we go. Okay, so this short signal, this short was across, and it occurred on a downslope on that EMA on the right. So perfect. Here was an up cross, but it actually was filtered out by the ADX. Here's an up cross, and the 15-minute was also sloping up, but the ADX filtered that out. Okay, so as you can see, you can really start narrowing it down. If you prefer fewer signals, this is generally the thought process that you go through. You say, what are the conditions that I require before a signal is allowed to pass through? And in this particular case, it appears, at least on the CL during this period of time, this does restrict the signals pretty substantially, which could be a good thing. Depends on how you plan to trade. Now, by default, the slope solver just looks at any level of slope, right? As long as the value from one bar to the next went up or down to any degree, then the slope solver will produce a signal. But remember, all these solvers in Bloodhound allow you to adjust their settings, including how steep the slope should be. All that is done if you click on the slope solver under output. Most of those types of rules are under the output settings area. So we'll go in here and you can adjust that to your liking. So for example, by default, it's saying if the EMA is rising by at least 0 points, that's where you'd change it if you wanted to, then produce a long output of 1. Remember, 1 is a full signal. And then for a short signal, if the EMA is falling by at least 0 points, then produce a short signal. So if we wanted to require a steeper slope, then we would increase the number on one or both of these. And remember, if you're ever not sure what a setting does, the documentation area of our website has a page for every one of these solvers and most other features in Bloodhound and Blackbird. But we actually added, if you're on the latest versions of NinjaTrader, we also added this Help tab. So if you're selected on a solver, click Help, and that actually loads the documentation for that solver. So it can be a really quick way to just see, okay, what does what does the weight do? And that gives an explanation of that if you're looking for detail. Okay, very helpful, very helpful. Now I want to suggest one piece of advice. It's a good idea to run Bloodhound on the lowest time frame. So you'll notice we're running Bloodhound on the 5-minute chart, and we only pulled in data from a higher time frame, the 15-minute chart. The main reason for that is just to ensure that the syncing of the bars works out so that you don't miss any signals. That if you're trying to pull in data from a lower time frame, it's possible not to get all the signals that you're expecting. Whereas if you run Bloodhound on the lowest time frame and then just pull in data from higher time frames, that works out better. Another piece of advice that we've found over the years that helps with the integrity of your signals is to work with a higher time frame that is a multiple of the time frame that you're working on. So again, we're on the 5-minute and we're looking at the 15-minute. That's better than if we had been on the 5-minute here and then pulled in data from an 11-minute, right? So 11 is not divisible by 5. It just tends to make the data and your signals more reliable so you get the signals that you're expecting. When you're working on multiple time frames, just taking these little precautions makes it more likely that you're going to get what you expect out of your signals.